Welcome back to our SXA tutorial series. Today we'll be talking about Scriban, template rendering within SXA. So as some of you might know, in previous versions of Sitecore, Velocity was one of the template rendering technologies used within Sitecore. And since Sitecore 9.3, the Velocity rendering engine has completely been removed. So therefore, there is no use for Velocity templates anymore within Sitecore. And within SXA, we still had a lot of people using template renderers, and we decided that we needed to have an alternative for that. Therefore, the SXA team has conducted quite some extensive research into addressing template rendering engines, and they came with the successor of Velocity, as for Sitecore matters, called Scriban. So now you can use Scriban, the template rendering language, Scriban templates to render your HTML in your rendering variants. You can sync your changes using Creative Exchange Live. So the Creative Exchange Live process has been altered so that you can now use and you can create those templates on your local disk and then sync them with your SXA instance. And you can edit them using Visual Studio Code. And for Visual Studio Code, we also made available an extension that helps you with some IntelliSense support as for specific Sitecore SXA functionalities.
So for me, I would have to mention that Scriban was completely new when it got introduced with SXA 9.3. So I've never heard of Scriban before. Not sure, Mark, have you heard of Scriban before? I mean, before SXA used it?
No, before they mentioned it to me, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. But as you mentioned already, I think there was quite some extensive work on finding the right successor of Velocity. And so they used Scriban or found Scriban, and they compared it to a lot of other scripting languages. And I think in terms of performance and the power behind it, Scriban was at the end the winner. And you can also see from that little graph here that, there are quite some differences in terms of memory usage or rendering time. So I think they made a good choice in terms of, also extensibility, but especially in terms of performance. So yes, Scriban is the new successor of Velocity in SXA. And if we see how we're going to use Scriban in Sitecore, well, basically we are still in our rendering variants. So in the rendering variants, you have now the option to use a Scriban renderer. So before with Velocity, there was a template renderer, and now there's a new renderer called Scriban. And that one allows you to add basically some markup within a multi-line text field, but no worries. This is not the way how it's how you need to work in future. Luckily, you can synchronize your changes through Creative Exchange Live and work in a code editor of your choice. If you use Visual Studio Code for that, as already mentioned, there has been an extension has been created to make your life easier in terms of finding the right extensions and functions that SXA offers.
Yeah, and one of the benefits as for Scriban for specifically front-end developers now is that they can alter the visual appearance of those rendering variants without logging into Sitecore, right? So they can still stick within their own environment, whether that would be Visual Studio Code or any other editor that they would prefer, so as long as the SXA Gulp task, the SXA watch in this case, run that watch on the background. All those files will still be synchronized within Sitecore, so there's no need for them to go into Sitecore to change the appearance of a component anymore.
Yeah, and so if we want to set up now Creative Exchange Live, all we have to do is basically create a folder called Scriban, and we are creating that folder. From our earlier tutorial, you know how to set up the theme using the SXA CLI. And we also talked about the folder structure in there. So the folder structure usually starts with this hyphen folder and then /media/something to have a structure for your theme. This is also what you get when you use Creative Exchange to export your theme and your site from your Sitecore instance. And on the same level as the media folder, you need now a Scriban folder in which you can organize later on your Scriban files. So that's why we will create a Scriban folder. And in addition to that, so the Scriban files will not synchronize to the theme, but they will synchronize to a site. And this configuration to what site we want to synchronize our Scriban files, we need to set up a configuration file, and this configuration file is called metadata.json. So this file we will create directly in the newly created Scriban folder. And this metadata.json file contains only, two things. On the one hand, the site ID of the site we want to synchronize our Scriban templates to, and on the other hand, the database that we want to synchronize to. Usually, I would say it will be the master database. Important to say, well, if you have run the SXA watch command before configuring all of that, it will not take your changes into account. So even the Scriban watcher was started, it will not consider the configuration that we just or that we will add. So we need to restart the SXA watcher or start the SXA watcher after we've done the Scriban configuration. So if we are creating now Scriban files that should be synchronized to the basically to the rendering variant, we need to follow a certain path structure under the Scriban folder, and that will follow the structure of starting with the rendering name and then the variant name, and then we can add the any renderer, however we would call the item in Sitecore, with a file extension called .scriban. And once we've created the file, well, if it's empty, it will not be synchronized to Sitecore. But the moment we start adding some markup, for example, it will start synchronizing to Sitecore and even create the item. So there's no need to create the item first in Sitecore. We can directly work from Visual Studio Code, and everything is synced into Sitecore, even the creation of the item. So the thing we want to do in our demo today is, in an earlier example or in an earlier tutorial, we've created a text teaser component, and we've created it using rendering variants and the items available. And this, component gives us currently such a markup. So I just copied it from the website just to see how it's going to look like. I'm not going to question how the markup is created or generated for us using the items. But what we want to do is reproduce the exact same markup using Scriban. And so I'm replacing now the field labels here. Sorry, the fields or the values in the fields I'm replacing with the actual Scriban parameters. So in most of the cases, what we will use in order to read fields from an item, we use the item and then the name of the field. Ideally, in Scriban, we have named all the fields without any blanks. So we can use underscores, or we can use camel case stuff, but having blanks will not work. So our fields are called label, headline, subheadline, and content. So we're using the iitem.label, iitem.headline, and so on to reference our fields in Sitecore. So let's actually do that. So in an earlier tutorial, we've created already a theme in that path here. So you see all the items, or sorry, all the files and folders that has been created by the SXA CLI. And we are creating now a new folder called Scriban and going to set up the Creative Exchange live process and then actually creating our first Scriban template. So what we need is a Scriban folder directly beside the media folder. maybe just to show the reason why it is so. So if we take a look in the config.js, which configures basically where our Scriban stuff needs to be, you can see that the path is expected to be at the /Scriban and then expecting anything and at the end then a file with the extension .scriban. So your Scriban folder should live somewhere else, then that's probably the place where you need to reconfigure things. But if you want to go the out-of-the-box way, then yeah, just do it that way. So we're creating a new folder called Scriban. And inside that folder, we are creating a new file called metadata.json. And in that file, we are going to copy paste a bit of our presentations. So let me go back here. I think I'm just doing it that way. And obviously this might be the wrong site ID. So let me jump into Sitecore to the site that I'm going to work with. So it's this site, the company dev site that I want to synchronize my Scriban templates to. So that's why I'm choosing this site ID and pasting it here. So that's all the configuration that I needed to do. And now I can actually start the SXA watch command. So let me open a new terminal. And I have to navigate to the right folder. So cd media, themes, SXA tutorial, company dev. There we go. SXA watch all. And I think, yeah, -d will give us some more output. So let's run that. It will ask us for logging into Sitecore. Yes, so that's right, giving the password. And we see that also the Scriban watcher has been started. So now under our Scriban folder, we can create the folder structure for the rendering and the variant, and then later on the Scriban file that we need to create. So just taking a look on how this is currently structured in the rendering variants. So if we take a look at the text teaser component that we want to recreate more or less. So component is called text teaser. So we will create a folder called text teaser. In there, we will create a folder called Scriban, maybe just as a Scriban variant or Scriban variant. And in there, we will create this Scriban renderer. So going back here, we create a new folder called text teaser. A new folder called Scriban. Scriban variant. Here I will create now a new file called, what should we call it? Text teaser. .scriban. So here's the file. And now let's add something to it. So I'm copy pasting now what you've seen in the presentation. So that's the markup that I want to use for it. So it's just a copy of the original markup that was generated by the SXA rendering variants for me. And I exchange these the values by the actual field names using the item. So saving my changes, and I can see the Scriban import was successful. Let's actually prove that. And refresh. So as you can see, there has been a text teaser Scriban item created for us that contains the exact markup that we wanted to provide in here. So that worked fine. And now let's do the test. So well, I've created here I think in an earlier example, text teaser test page already. Let's open up this one. And here's my not so pretty, but text teaser component. And we see we have now another variant available. And if I switch the variant, so I clicked it. Let's see. Yeah, well, as expected, nothing changed. But yeah, so we simply recreated now our variant for the text teaser component. As you can see, I'm using the Scriban variant now, but it looks exactly the same. So yeah, that would be an option to recreate the component that we created earlier.
Could you go back to the content editor now and show the content editor in Sitecore?
Yes.
And show the variant itself, the definition. Yeah, so what you see right here is you see that the template Sebastian created is now imported into Sitecore. And what you can also see is that there is no tag defined or whatsoever in the variant details, no CSS class, no data attributes whatsoever. Scriban does give you a whole lot more flexibility into the HTML that is being rendered, right? So, for example, in that HTML, you see a class field label and whatsoever. Those are things you can easily remove right now. These are elements that are created by using the traditional rendering variants, but Scriban, well, as said, gives you a lot more flexibility, and you can really customize the HTML output as much as you want to, for that matter. Really, the thing that the template renderer does is it's more or less just replaces those values, the item.label, with the actual value that is being stored within the CMS. So yeah, I think a whole lot more flexibility that you are getting from using Scriban. So that's something you can really benefit from if your use case requires that.
Yeah, maybe two things more worth to mention. So on the one hand, this is a one-way synchronization. So if you start editing something here, it will not be synchronized back into your template. So be careful just editing it from Visual Studio Code, and then it's synced to Sitecore, but it's not the other way around. The second thing is that, as I said, we are using here the Sitecore Scriban extension that has been provided by the SXA team. And this, on the one hand, gives us this, syntax highlighting or syntax coloring. But you also get some help. So if we start using, for example, some of the out-of-the-box functions, and you start typing SC, then it gives you already a list of all functions currently available. So, and if we go for any of them, SC execute, you get directly what you basically need to do. And I think, well, in this example, you also get some information directly about what this function is about. So you can click here the more link, and if this is something that has been provided by SXA, you will be directly directed to the SXA documentation to get even more information about that function. If this is something that comes with Scriban, then you are directly linked to the Scriban documentation to that point where this is actually explained. So very helpful in terms of developing your Scriban functionalities or Scriban scripts to be supported by that auto-completion and also documentation here. Maybe makes sense also to take a quick look on the documentation. So in the SXA documentation, you will find a lot about the Scriban templates starting from here. So it gives you a whole lot idea with also with a video tutorial created by Mark and Adam. But it gives you also an idea and a lot of examples how to implement things, and then you get a detailed overview about all the items and objects that you can access with documentations on it, and then all the embedded functions that you get out of the box with examples. So you can always copy paste code to try out things and be inspired basically on what can be done. So it's really well documented of you.
Yeah,
then
and
you
it's
also
also quite feature rich, right? So it's not just displaying values, but you can also loop through items. You can do search queries. You can use your own models within Scriban, add your own extensions to that, and it's a very rich language. It's way more than just displaying values from the CMS essentially.
yes. Yeah, so hope you got a little introduction into the world of Scriban used in SXA, and yeah, try it out and give us your feedback on that.
And
yeah.
check out our next video if you want to see how you can use Scriban to create your own component and make it editable for the author at the same time.
Yeah. So see you and thanks for watching.